Hey YouTube, Untamed here. So a couple of you have already reached out to me and asked if I wouldn't mind providing you guys a video comparing my ownership experience of my 2023 Toyota Sequoia TRD Pro along with my ownership experience of my newly purchased 2023 Lexus LX600 F Sport here. So I kind of put my brain bites to it and drafted up a list of a few different lists. So a list that really highlights what I think the LX600 F Sport here does better than the Sequoia. I put a list together stating what I think the Sequoia does better than the F Sport, and then I'll wrap up the video with my final list of how I think they're on par with one another. Okay, so we'll kind of go through that. I recently owned the Sequoia TRD Pro and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. I think it's a phenomenal vehicle. We ended up selling it to get a little bit better of a family hauler. So I bought it with intentions of it being our primary family hauler. It was wishful thinking because I knew the cargo space was going to be pretty tight, but I was wondering if we could make it work. And having 4 kids, it served to be a little bit of a headache, unfortunately. So we ended up selling it and buying this. So we bought the Escalade ESV. Now, I'm not a huge Cadillac fan. I never have been, but when it comes to space for a family, it doesn't get much better than this, guys. So you get a huge third row, perfect for the kiddos, and then a huge cargo space beyond that to actually put your strollers and whatnot. So that's why we actually sold it. I think it's important to open the video with that because I do love the Sequoia. So what does the F Sport do better? What does the Lexus do better than that Toyota? So I'm gonna kind of rip through it as fast as I can here, not make this too long of a video. So up front, most importantly, I shouldn't say most importantly, but up front, the handling. So the handling certainly feels better in the Lexus here. I mean, they call it the LX600 F Sport handling. That's what they refer to it as. With the active high control, the air suspension here, I mean, it really is a phenomenal driving experience. It hugs the roads, it hugs the corners. It doesn't dip and dive and hit the brakes. It really does feel excellent. And not too harsh either. So I think it's kind of a unique balance, right? So it handles turns extremely well, doesn't dip and dive, but it's also not harsh when you go over speed bumps or any kind of bump. So I love that. The second thing is it feels much more premium. So this might be a no-brainer, of course. Let me pop in, I'll show you real quick. All of the materials on the inside here are second to none, right? So every single thing in here has soft touch, leather, this is real metal up here, metal handles, of course. Even this up here has kind of a soft feel to it. It's not a hard plastic. Stitching within the dash, the glove box. The entire dash is leather wrapped. Metal bezels all throughout. Everything in here really does feel the price tag. It feels over $100,000 in here. Felt headliner. I digress. I just want to at least show you that real quick. It really is extremely plush and premium on the interior there. The Sequoia, as you imagine, it does have a lot of hard plastic. So if you look at my old videos of it, you'll see, up on the dash, up all throughout it, and even in 2023 we had the tan headliner. So it's just a lot of like not cutting corners, but like little cheap cop outs all throughout it, and you feel that. And they're trying to keep the price semi-affordable, semi-down, but even then it was pretty expensive, being over $80,000. But there you go. That's my number 2. Premium feel all throughout the F Sport here. The third one is headroom and visibility. So visibility is I think has always been a staple of the Land Cruiser at large. You get a huge windshield up front, a ton of visibility all throughout. You get these giant windows all throughout it. Never ever compromising visibility. So I think I'm just walking over a tumbleweed. How about that? Welcome to Wyoming. So excellent visibility all throughout. Not to say that Sequoia doesn't, but this is noticeably better, is what I'm getting at here. You see the door panel kind of dips down a little bit. The mirrors are off to the side. They're not jetting straight out from the window, the corner here. So it just kind of adds to the overall visibility all throughout. So that's great, and great headroom too. Barely better than the Sequoia, I'll say for that. All right, number 4, perhaps, I think, this is the most important, and maybe some of you won't agree with this, but I take tremendous pride knowing that this is built out of Japan. The Land Cruiser 300 series in this, built out of Japan. They have a dedicated manufacturing plant to it. the Japanese take tremendous pride in building this vehicle. This is their flagship SUV. You know, the Land Cruiser nameplate has been around the longest, and they take tremendous pride, and you can tell that with the premium quality control all throughout this vehicle. And all the Land Cruisers I've ever owned have always been premium, second to none quality. So, and you see that with the Lexus here, absolutely. So I love the fact that it is still built in Japan. I mean, when you're buying property or land, you know, everybody always says location, 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 right? I mean, I think the same kind of applies for where a vehicle is built. You know, I mean, even like the Toyota's being built in Mexico right now. They moved the Toyota Tacoma to Mexico entirely. I don't know. I don't love that. I'm sure, you know, the quality's just fine for now, but what will it look like in 10 years? I mean, will we see that difference in long-term quality, right? So I think that's important, and I love the fact that this is built in Japan. I digress. Next point here, full-time four-wheel drive. So another staple of the Land Cruiser, a real Land Cruiser, is, you know, having that full-time four-wheel drive that just gives it that phenomenal off-roading capability. We get that in this. You do not get that in the Sequoia. You get the part-time four-wheel drive where you can manually click it into 4, right? But when you do click it into 4, you're going to get that chopping sensation when you turn tight. Whereas you don't get that. You get that torsion limited slip differential in this that allows it to be more seamless, right, when you're turning, and it's always four-wheel drive. So I love that about the LX here compared to the Sequoia. You know, on that note too, it does have a couple more off-roading goodies compared to the Sequoia. The Sequoia TRD Pro, being the TRD Pro, does have a whole lot of options, so don't get me wrong, phenomenal off-roader across the board. But this actually does have a couple additional things. It has that center diff lock, and also has the, I forget what they call it exactly, but the wheel lock for tighter turns. So you can hit a button in there and it'll actually, you know, lock up the inside rear wheel as you're making a left turn, right? Or locking up the other side rear wheel as you're taking a tight right turn to kind of make it even tighter when you're in mud or something like that. So a couple other additional goodies, but both of them have, you know, your traditional things that you come to expect from Toyota and Lexus, and that is like multi-terrain selection, crawl control, blah, 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 stuff like that. And the Sequoia has the center diff lock. Alrighty, next up here, third row. Sorry guys, it's like wicked cold out here. I know it probably doesn't look it, but it is. Next one is the third row. So in the back, I'll pop open the back and show you as I'm out back here. So the third row in the LX folds flat, right? So you get that. You know, it makes it so when you do fold it in, you can actually load up the cargo space much easier. Whereas the Sequoia, they do not fold flat, and that's because the Sequoia does have, we'll talk about this later, the iForce Max. So it does have, you know, electric motors attached to it, you know, electric batteries supporting the 3.4 liter twin turbo V6. So, and they're underneath right here in the vehicle, so it doesn't allow it actually to go into the vehicle, if that makes sense. So it's suspended a little bit. I'll show you what it looks like when we pop it up, and you'll real quickly see the same detriment that we had with the Sequoia, and that is the terrible cargo space out back. And this is ultimately what made us want to sell that Sequoia, right? Because this is all we had about. You know, the Sequoia has a little bit of a shelving system back here to try to give you a little bit better of an options, but it just wasn't ideal for a family of 6. If you got 2 kiddos, I think you'll make it work just fine. And I think most people with 2 kiddos will love it. But once you teeter to 3 or more, that's when it becomes a detriment, really, when you're putting strollers and stuff back here. If you even have 3, you can, you know, get the 2 car seats or do all the way across. But even then, if you have 3 kids, you know, that's never a totally wise move because they're going to fight or whatever. So you put 2 on the sides, 1 right here, and then maybe you can put a stroller right here easy if you have 3. But we have 4. So yeah, my wife just keeps having them. Not sure what the deal is. She's a rascal. So anyways, there's what the third row looks like here. You know, the fact that it folds flat is a good thing, I think. Next point, this is how you shut it, by the way. Next point here, and this is where I might get some flack, but I personally love the fact that this is not the iForce Max. And you know, I've owned the Tundra TRD Pro and I've owned the Sequoia TRD Pro, the new ones, and I just don't love the synthetic feel that the iForce Max provides with that hybrid battery pack strapped to it. I just don't love it. You know, when you turn on when you put on the brake, hit the button, push to start, instead of the engine roaring to life, you get kind of a buzzing. It just kind of buzzes a little bit, and it doesn't actually fire up. It just doesn't feel, especially when I had the Tundra, like it didn't feel like a truck. It just doesn't feel right to me. And I know that's a subjective opinion, and I think a lot of people may disagree with that, and rightfully so. And I hope a lot of people disagree with me on that, to be honest. But I personally enjoy having, you know, just right here. I think I like naturally aspirated engines best, but this twin turbo 3.4 liter V6 without the battery pack strapped to it feels right to me. So I digress. I like that. And, you know, with the Sequoia in particular, you did get a lot more noise pumped in through the speaker system. Synthetic fake V8 sound, if you will, exhaust note pumped through the speakers. I hate that. I don't like it. All right. Next point here, I already kind of talked about it, but the fact that this really is the Land Cruiser that we get. You know, I've always been a huge Land Cruiser fan and enthusiast. I've owned a few at this point, and I just love them. You know, and this is the Land Cruiser we get, the real Land Cruiser we get, not the, I won't get into that, but I preferred this, the Japanese built 300 series, right? So I love the fact that it shares all the same underpinnings as it, and it carries the same street cred. So that is not my last point. The final point here is it is noticeably more comfortable. We talked about that a little bit, but these seats, they are so soft. You know, again, when I make these points, it's not saying the Sequoia is bad. It's just by comparison, this is noticeably better. Those seats are, like the headrest in particular, it's like a pillow. You know, it actually compresses a ton when you put your head into it. So I love how comfortable this is. You know, on a longer drive, this, you know, you don't feel sore at all. This is just, I don't know, it feels good. So let's talk about the Sequoia. All right, so the Sequoia is better in a few regards here for sure. So up front, the most obvious, let's get it out of the way, and that is the price tag, right? The price tag makes a lot more sense. Heck, you can buy a Sequoia TRD Pro for $80,000, assuming you can get it at MSRP, right? Dealers be licking their chops every day to try to hustle people on them, even still, unfortunately. But if you get it at MSRP, which is $80,000-ish, right? That right there allows you to buy a freaking Camry with the amount that you would save by not getting the LX here. So this was a $111,000 some change MSRP, right? So I paid 113 something because I had to buy some additional paint protection and window tint, blah blah blah. So 113 grand. You know, we're talking, what is that, a $33,000 gap between them? That's the Toyota Camry about, right? So that is a lot of coin, and definitely worth noting, because that is a big difference. I think often myself too, will be like, well, they're pretty similarly priced, but when you look at it that way, it is pretty substantial, right? So the price tag, number one. Number two, more space. So that second and third row out back, let me show you the second row here. The second and third row out back in the Sequoia is a ton more spacious, right? And that probably shouldn't come as a surprise to a lot of people. Not to say this is bad. You got better headroom, I would say, but you know, not a whole lot of legroom out here. You know, you get a little bit of adjustability on it, but not a lot. So this right here, it's okay, but again, in the Sequoia, you get in there and you can go through the center and get to the two or the seats out back, the third row. So that is, you know, if you have kids, it is best to have, I think anyway, to have two seats out here, two captain's chairs, and then you can walk through the center and get to the third row. And that's what you had in the Sequoia, and that did make more sense for the kiddos. So a ton of space actually in the cabin, no gripes there whatsoever, but it's just beyond that third row, we had nothing. And if you're filling up this cabin with kids, more often than not, you're gonna have a few pieces of cargo that you're taking with you, typically a stroller. So it just didn't make sense, unfortunately. So there you have it. Sequoia, definitely more space. Fuel economy, so barely the Sequoia beats it, okay? I think on paper, when you look at the window sticker, yeah, I think they're on par. But the reality is I have not experienced that at all. Granted, maybe it's because I'm breaking it in here, but I have not experienced good fuel economy out of this. I've been averaging, I think, just under 14 miles to the gallon, and a lot of that has been freeway. So I'm kind of baffled by how terrible this has been on fuel economy compared to that Sequoia. You know, Sequoia, the only difference really is it has a 3.0 liter twin turbo V6, but it does have the electric motors helping it out a little bit, right? giving it a little bit more power. So fuel economy, barely. Power is perhaps the second most obvious example, but because it does have that iForce Max, same exact engine as this pretty much, but with that, the battery pack, it does crank out 437 horsepower and 583 foot-pounds of torque. Whereas this right here, without the battery pack strapped to it, it does crank out 409 horsepower and 479 foot-pounds of torque. Well, we got a buggy feature, guys. We got a buggy feature. Say hey, YouTube. What you doing? You should put shoes on, dude. It's cold. All right, and the final point for the Sequoia is a softer suspension, right? So you get the Fox TRD tuned suspension in the TRD Pro Sequoia, and it feels plush. It feels so nice. Going over any kind of bump, dip, dive, entry point for any kind of driveway, off-roading. God forbid you do that, right? It absorbs everything. So it gets the nod when it comes to having a softer suspension for sure. This one does have the active height control, so you can kind of go up and down with it, which is cool. I like that, especially if you do find yourself in a sticky situation, you can pop up a bit. All right, guys, so that is what I have for the Sequoia being better. Now, here's a few things that I think they're on par with. So for really the people who are truly cross-shopping the two vehicles, here are the things where I think they're very important points, and I think they're neck and neck. Okay, so if any of these are deal breakers for you, I don't know, maybe go with the cheaper option. Get the Sequoia if you can get one. So the turn radius. So the turn radius feels great in both. I was actually pretty worried about that when I bought the Sequoia, because before that, I actually already had owned the 2023 Toyota Tundra TRD Pro, my black one that I had, and the turn radius was awful in it. It was terrible, and it always bothered it. Perhaps this is my biggest gripe with the Tundra. In a second. And I didn't understand, because the previous generation Tundra, the V8 Tundra that we had before, had a phenomenal turn radius. So I just kind of expected Toyota to carry that torch to the new gen, or even make it better, right? But they did not. It was pretty bad. So I was kind of worried when I got the Sequoia. I knew the wheelbase was a little bit better, so I was kind of hopeful. And it was a ton better. The Sequoia turn radius is just fine. You're not going to have any gripes with it, I promise you. And it's very comparable to the LX here. The LX is slightly better. The official numbers is, the LX has a 19.7 foot turn radius, whereas the Sequoia has a 22.3 foot turn radius, and that's the TRD Pro in particular. Okay, so I mean, they're pretty similar, and they feel dang near identical. You're not going to really notice the difference between them two, and that's largely because of the wheelbase, right? So you have a 112-inch wheelbase here, and that Sequoia TRD Pro has a 122-inch wheelbase. It's a little bit bigger, of course. On par shifting speed, they both share a 10-speed automatic transmission. I think that's important to note for a lot of people. And this next point here might shock some of you. It kind of shocks me a little bit, but the overall sturdiness and feel of it, that's always been something that has gravitated me toward the Land Cruisers of the past. It's just how heavy they feel and sturdy the doors are. It feels like you're driving a bank vault, and the LX here is no different. However, the handling feels tighter, so it makes it feel lighter on its feet, even though it's not, right? So I mean, they're both just as heavy, but the sturdy feel of both, and the Sequoia TRD Pro in particular, I remember being hugely impressed by just how heavy the doors were. They didn't feel like flimsy door cards. It actually felt like a very well put together vehicle. In the Sequoia being built in the US, it could be either or, right? But I think it was very well put together. So I was really impressed with that on both. They both do share the same Toyota global platform, which is that TNGAF chassis. It's that body on frame design that we've all kind of come to love, that they offer with these SUVs here. Next thing is modern creature comforts. Both of them have all of the modern creature comforts, and kind of emphasize modern, right? So you got the blind spot monitors, all the parking assist. You got everything that you would expect from a vehicle made in 2023. This, of course, does have some additional tech to it, which you would expect for sure, being $30-something thousand more. But I don't think you won't be unimpressed by the level of tech in the Sequoia is what I'm getting at. So they're both truly on par, especially given their price points, I think. Styling cues, I don't know. I could have gone either way on this. I think I do like, you tell me if you guys agree, I like the front end of the LX better. You know, the spindle grille, sometimes you either love it or hate it, but I think the fact that this is the F Sport and kind of have the blacked out cues, blacked out accents, I think kind of makes it a little bit more subdued and not so much in your face. So I love the front end of the LX here compared to the Sequoia. But I would say that I like the Sequoia side better. You know, you get those nice fender body lines all throughout the Sequoia, and that kind of loop into the door in a very dramatic way on the Sequoia in particular. This looks good too, don't get me wrong, but I do think the Sequoia does look better from the side. I don't love the rear end on either of them, but I do think I prefer the Lexus between the two. I think a lot of people actually gripe about the Sequoia looking and feeling like a minivan out back. And both of them have a standard hatch, for the record, not a split tail on the LX here, as you saw. Maybe my last point here I'll make is the weight. And I'm gonna kind of make 2 points off of this one. So the weight is very similar in both, right? The Sequoia does weigh a little bit more. The Sequoia weighs in at 6,100, or well, just 6,150 pounds is what it comes in at. And whereas this is just under 5,700 pounds. And for you business folks out there, it is important to note that you do get the Section 179 IRS tax code exemption, or deduction I should say, when you buy a vehicle over 6,000 pounds. So if you have a company or a business, LLC or whatnot, you could leverage perhaps that tax code there. So something to look into if you've never heard of it, the Section 179 tax code. So there you have it, guys. I think I geeked out plenty with you. Just really wanted to highlight my thoughts on both of the vehicles and get your thoughts. You know, I mean, which vehicle would you prefer to buy? Would you prefer to save $30,000 plus and get that Sequoia TRD Pro? Again, assuming you can get it at MSRP, or would you lean toward the Lexus here? So I geeked out plenty. Appreciate you watching as always. Till next time.